Welcome, everyone. Thanks for coming to our program today. My name is Sheila Dougherty, and I'm the Director for Experience Career Services at Villanova. Today's program is called Communicating with Strengths, Elevating Your Team's Impact. Today's program is a part of Nova Network November. Nova Network November is a series of events dedicated to enhancing the professional development of alumni, graduate students, and students in our College of Professional Studies. All programs take part in the month of November. We're nearing the end of it now. This is actually our third week, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. I'm going to go around and ask the panel to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. Maybe we can start with Katie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Kokel. I work in finance at Johnson & Johnson. I support enterprise research and development. And I was first introduced to Clifton Strengths through J&J back in 2010. And I guess I've been a bit of a strengths enthusiast ever since.
Thanks, Katie. Paolo.
My name is Paulo Vieira-Diaz. I lead the learning and development at USLBM, a holdings company, and I have used Clifton Strengths in the past. I'm by no means an expert, but I really enjoy and have had great results using it.
Thanks, Paolo. Jen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Derry. I work in human resources here at Villanova University. In my role here, I do a lot of work on training and development for our staff employees and have been very involved over the last 4 years in Villanova's own Strengths Initiative. And I do quite a bit of work with managers and staff in coaching them in their strengths and helping them to apply their strengths at work.
Thanks, Jen. And last but not least, Kevin.
Everyone, great to be here with everyone today. My name is Kevin Grubb. I am the Associate Vice Provost for Professional Development and Executive Director of the Career Center at Villanova, and very much enjoy strengths-based approaches to things, and I'm excited to talk about this with everybody today. I am the chair of our steering committee for our Strengths Initiative at Villanova, which impacts all undergraduate students and many graduate students and other students at the university, as well as Jen mentioned, our faculty and staff. So we have a lot of great stuff to share about how strengths-based approaches have benefited each of us and more importantly, the Villanova community. So we wanted to start off with a little bit of an introduction about strengths-based approaches, and what you're all seeing in the backgrounds for each of us are our top 5 strengths as they would be reported in the Clifton Strengths Assessment. But what we definitely want to mention is, while we will be talking a lot about strengths in the context of Clifton Strengths, that's maybe the capital S, we're also thinking about this in the lowercase s, just the concept of what it means to be thinking about your strengths, not necessarily your Clifton strengths, but your strengths at work, and how that, as the program title says, can elevate your team's impact. So I'm going to pull up a couple quick slides. We are not going to over crush you with PowerPoint, but we have a couple things to sort of set the stage for this conversation to help you understand some of the research on why strengths-based approaches are so meaningful and important to folks at work. So if you'll bear with me one second, and I'll just ask a fellow panelist to give me the verbal sign that you can see my screen. So can we all see that? Yes? Okay. Yes. Great. Wonderful. So in the context of strengths-based approaches, what we wanted to lay the foundation for is that the conventional wisdom is what you see here. If you're good at something, you don't need to worry about it. You're already good at it. And if you really want to get better, you should focus on something that's wrong and fix it. And it's not to say that we don't appreciate that approach. Of course, if there are challenges or difficulties, it might be worthy to spend some time with addressing those things and making those things better. But what a strengths-based approach takes you into, and again, this is, could be using Clifton Strengths or other assessments that exist out there that help you understand your strengths, is that people who focus on using their strengths, they actually maximize their potential. So the goal here is to think about what you do best and spend more time building and leaning into those things while managing around your weaknesses. So the shift in thinking here is taking the focus off of weaknesses or problems and actually put the central focus on what you are good at. And then also thinking about how to help those things solve the problems or work toward the problems. So that is the fundamental shift in a strengths-based approach that is going to underpin a lot of the examples and stories and things that we will all talk about throughout this panel session today. And I'm going to throw it to Jen, who's going to talk with you a little bit about the research that we see that centers on what strengths-based approaches do for teams and workplaces and some of the real results that people get out of actually taking this strengths-based approach and using it in their workplaces.
Thanks so much, Kevin. So right, you might think that conventional approach is working for me. What's the benefit to going with more strengths-based or strengths-focused development? And I'll tell you, when we as an institution looked at some of this data, it was hard to not pay attention, right? That what we know, according to Gallup research over the course of the past several decades, the people who have the opportunity to actually use their strengths and to understand their strengths and kind of operate in their strength zone are 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs and to strongly agree that they have the chance to do what they do best every day. This also so tied into health and well-being. That sense of well-being, I think, has never been more important, or at least such a spotlight on it in this moment. And I think that will be a lasting impact of what we've all been experiencing over the last couple of years, that we know that those who focus on using their strengths 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. Then when we look a step out to then what happens when a group of individuals are working together and in a team with a strengths-based approach, that they're 12.5% more productive and have a 15% lower turnover rate, which is certainly something I pay attention to in my own role in HR in this particular labor market, knowing that this is a reason why people will stay and feel a real sense of engagement in their roles. Regardless, though, looking at those who focus on strengths at work, you can see here on this slide, look, these kinds of things are so powerful. They look forward to going to work. They treat their customers, their students, their constituents better, achieving more on a daily basis, have more positive, creative, and innovative moments, telling their friends that they work for a great organization. And beyond that, people are more confident, more likely to achieve their goals, more likely to report having ample energy, feeling well rested, being happy, smiling or laughing a lot, learning something interesting, and being treated with respect. And they're less likely to report experiencing worry, stress, anger, sadness, or even physical pain. So with that, why not use strengths? So I'm going to throw it to Sheila. So I'd love to hear from the colleagues on this panel more about how we're using this at work.
Muted.
2021, how could I be muted still? Great, thank you so much, Kevin and Jen, for that overview. That really set us up nicely for our conversation today. I appreciate that. So let's start out with one of the basics. How can professionals in the workplace articulate their strengths and leverage them in their day-to-day interactions?
So I don't know if you can articulate your strengths, and it's not like you're walking around with a badge that these are my strengths. And that is why I think that Clifton strengths enforcement, or any other initiative, they only work when the manager is involved and really foments that information to be propagated throughout the organization. If the manager is involved and committed to not only use people's strengths, but making sure that they are known through the organization, that is, I think, a very important step for the strengths to be known across the organization. I can tell you that one thing that I did, that the last team that I led did and really worked, was that each one framed their 5 strengths and put them in the cubicle. So when someone would approach them, the first thing they saw was their strengths.
It's funny you say that, Paolo, because we've done something similar at J&J with the little placards that folks have on their desks. And it's really a great foundation to have a conversation and to strike up, a chat with someone about their strengths and maybe how yours are similar or different. So I think that's a great way to really ingrain it in the day-to-day. It's all about the conversation. I agree that it starts with, a manager and really making sure that that person wants to keep it alive and keep it part of the day-to-day conversation. We've done team activities as well, where you kind of plot everyone's strengths out. It's a great way to kind of keep it alive and have some engaging conversation. And the other thing I'll also say that's probably somewhat obvious, but whenever I'm talking to Villanova students who have gone through Clifton Strengths, I always remind them, like, you have answers to some of the toughest interview questions. What are your strengths? Oh, let me tell you about some of my strengths. And you don't even have to call them Clifton Strengths, but it's just a great way for you to articulate some of the attributes that are truly you.
So building off of that, I'm really thinking similarly, Katie, that it's not so much like rattling off that list, right? So much as it is being able to articulate what that means to you. And maybe you've never taken Clifton Strengths. There are, other assessments out there that give you those clues to talent, but thinking about what you bring to the table and being able to articulate that, what's important to you in work and in your relationships, even what you need from your boss or from your colleagues in order to be successful. Being able to articulate those things is such an important way to sort of live strengths in your work.
Yeah, and building off of that, I would say for me, working with my team and other teams at the university, if they understand my strengths, that can also be helpful for me to say, like, look, here are some guardrails I need you to help put on me sometimes. Communication is my number one. So there's a lot of times and that has helped me think about myself sometimes to say, okay, sit on your hands, Kevin. Your likelihood of your communication is verbal processing. So sometimes hold on and give other people then permission to say, hey, Kevin, can I get some airtime? Or is there a way I can contribute differently? So by knowing my own strengths and articulating them and having other people understand how they live for me, it becomes a very productive conversation all the time about how we work together. So sort of understanding these strengths, and I'll point up there we go, the 5 that you're seeing up there, what they mean to me, to further get on the point that Jen and Katie are talking about, really being able to articulate what that means to me, because it might mean something different to each person. But having that understanding and awareness helps me put up the guardrails around myself, and gives me the license to tell other people, I need you to help me with these guardrails, because that's going to be my MO. That's going to be my primary way of operating, and I'll need your help so we can work together.
Kevin, that sets us up so nicely for question number 2. When you say sit on your hands, when have you overused your strengths, and when might strengths get in the way of team cohesion?
I can jump in there.
Oh, you go.
Sure, I'll go. I'm a learner, as you can see, one of my top 2 strengths there. And so I know I tend to ask a lot of questions, and I'm an achiever as well. So I like to kind of make sure I'm checking the box on things and learning everything as quickly as I can when I'm coming into a new space. So I know that I've definitely seen myself overuse that strength. And so I think that's something I'm very cognizant of. And I think with all of the strengths with anything in life, really, it's about that. Clifton calls it the balcony and the basement, but you can use it to be your greatest strength, but it can also be something that's your detriment, depending on where you kind of fall on that scale. As far as where strengths might get in the way of team cohesion, I think cautioning folks to make sure that they're not using their strengths as an excuse to not do something because it's not one of your strengths. There's certain examples of that, right? But you don't want someone to say, oh, that's not my strength. Why don't we have Jen do that, because that's one of her strengths and not one of mine. So I think that can certainly get in the way when you kind of use it as an excuse.
For me, the one that gets most in the way, it's empathy, because I want everybody to be happy all the time. And sometimes that's not possible, but yet I'm still trying. That gets in the way. In terms of being counterproductive, what I try to instill in my team is that these are references, these are not labels. So just because I am responsible, responsibility is one of my strengths. It's not a label. It's, I may wake up a day and I'm not responsible. So just these are just references.
That's such a good point. Sheila, I had to laugh when you asked that question, because I thought, when you said when was the time, I thought 5 minutes ago, it's one of those things. It's like every day, all the time, and having an awareness of your strengths, you can see where it's working for you. And Kevin, the communication in me relates to the communication in you. That's always one for me, is monitoring when to step back, when to make sure other people have space to be able to communicate. I know when I'm leading with belief can make me really passionate about a topic. And sometimes there are other things that need to get on the agenda as well. I can sort of live and die by a cause once in a while. And so, I think it's always thinking not just about what you're bringing in a moment, but also what your colleagues need, and that awareness of others around you and of their own talents and strengths, and how you can allow other people to shine in their own strengths in any given moment is so important too. And that sort of helps keep your own strengths in the right zone.
Yeah, I would say that as you're all talking, I'm thinking it's bringing up for me, the idea of, and maybe this is my strategic strength coming into play here, but thinking about which strength to pick for which situation. It might be that in one situation for me, and I very much feel you, Paolo, which is probably my empathy, but I feel you on the empathy that you want to make everybody happy, and that can be tough. So sometimes that's the right strength to lead with or come off with, and sometimes it's not in different situations. So, where I think I could get into trouble is not sort of thinking about the right ones to lean into in different moments, because every situation presents itself differently and requires a different approach. And, how we have thought about it at Villanova is a lot of these strengths and your strengths, whatever they are, however you define them, really are helping you understand your approach, how you just naturally approach situations, and then how other people might naturally approach that same situation. And they're not right or wrong. They're just different perspectives. But you can also think about which of the strengths, might I need to lean into most given where I am. And sometimes what gets in the way is leaning into the wrong one, at least for me.
I think for a manager is really essential to know people's strengths, because then you can actually assign tasks. I'm thinking of a moment where in a company that I worked previously, where some of our employees went through a traumatic period because they were in a tornado area, and we needed to take care of 300 or 400 type of personal loans that the company would process for those employees. And I chose someone in my team who had the achiever and the empathy. So, and in 2.5 days, she alone created all that paperwork and put all those processes through, just using her strengths. So I think it's important for managers to know, and to know how to use them.
Just
Thanks,
piggybacking off of that, I think another great example where knowing your team's strengths for me was really helpful is the pandemic. For the last 1.5 years, and especially during those first 6 to 9 months, I was really looking out for the folks on my team who had woo in their top 5. And I'm looking at you, Kevin, the people who really needed that in-person interaction and on a regular basis, and they just didn't have it. And so I thought about my team and the individuals I worked with very differently, because I was cognizant of their strengths.
I think that's something that a lot of us who are, utilizing strengths did need to be aware of. And I had somebody on my team who had connectedness, and that was the pandemic was really tough for that person as well. So speaking about managers and team members, how might managers and team members use a strengths-based approach to managing conflicts?
Oh. I can go because the last team that I managed before this company, I had 7 or 8 people really in conflict. The team was not producing. And so that's the team, the last team that I had going through the strengths. And the way I used it was actually very simple. I already said that I made frames, dollar store frames, and put them on our cubicles. But we had several sessions where we sat as a team and we talked about the strengths that we have as a team. And then each person kind of took center stage, and every other person would have to go and look at that person's strengths and pick 1 or 2 and really tell the whole team why that person had those strengths and what that person brought to the team because of those strengths. And the energy that created for the 4 or 5 times we did that together actually brought the team together, and they're still together now. And we go out to lunch, even though I'm not in that company anymore. So it works.
I love that, Paolo. I have seen similar things in my work in training and coaching teams on a strengths-based approach, and conflicts and personality mismatches that have just festered for sometimes even years. Having this common language around strengths allows you to see your colleagues not for those irritations and frustrations you experience with them, but it allows you to reframe that into their strengths, and realizing that strengths also get in your way.
Yeah.
But right, that it's not just, it's not all good all the time, but they could reframe their thinking of the rub there wasn't because somebody was trying to ruin their life or be out to get them, right? It was maybe a strength being over applied. And that has helped people just get unstuck and find a creativity around how to approach encouraging a new dynamic or a new script with that person. And it's been really powerful to see that kind of thing happen. And I love that exercise that you brought up. I think that's great.
Yeah, I think the dynamic is twofold, because I might have a problem with you, Jennifer, but when I am forced to see the positive in you,
Yes.
my mind is shift as far as you're concerned. And you probably with a riff with me, you're listening to me saying good things about you, and you shift as well. So it's really powerful.
It's so true. And it also, I think in the work it forces you to do on yourself, you realize you can come across to others.
Yeah.
And it's not all good either. So it's that humility that comes with it of, I see now how I'm contributing to this.
Yep.
Where I own my reaction and my response and my hand in it.
Yeah, and I would say just an example, personally, there are people that I've worked with who possibly a little bit like you, Katie, who the way that they engage and the way that they show interest is by asking a lot of questions. And for me, who is strategic and futuristic, like if I'm leaning in those directions, I'm like, let's go. Like in my mind, I've already answered all the questions, which I probably haven't. And I already see what the future is going to look like in 2 years, which I might not have all the way perfect. But in my mind, that's just my natural where I'm probably inclined to be going. So someone who's asking a lot of questions might be perceived by me as like, oh my gosh, stop. We just need to be going. But what actually understanding that person's approach, that's their way of demonstrating commitment and energy and engagement and thoughtfulness, right? So understanding that about that person helps me not be looking at that as something that's against what I'm doing, but rather is very supportive of what I'm doing, and probably one of the best ways that person can support what I'm doing. So it's really important in the understanding of each other's strengths, and to your point, Jen, the understanding of yourself, what you're probably more likely to be winding up doing and how that might come across. And then understanding, if that person is doing that thing, that means they're really engaged. Now, whether it might be over-applied or misapplied, we could talk about, but at least I would know that person's really engaged. That's how they show engagement. That helps you, or helps me, reframe the way that we're interacting in positive and productive ways.
Yeah, I agree with everything that everyone said, and I think it helps. Strengths helps provide the why behind the what, that additional context that you need to really understand why someone is showing up the way that they are. Which, as humans, as people, I think it just helps each of us to have that, and it helps us get beyond conflict when you're engaging with someone in that way.
The only other thing I'd add to this is that strengths gives you a window into what the role of conflict is for a person. In other words, there are some folks that really view conflict as such a positive and an ultimate form of care for someone. I engage in conflict with you because I believe in our relationship or in the work, and I want us to get to a better place. And other people where conflict is very hurtful or invasive. And even knowing that and having conversations as a team about, looking at your strengths and what insights you get about how individuals in the team approach conflict, and being able to create some norms around that, I think can be really important at work.
That's great. And to the audience, we're for sure going to answer your questions as we go through. For now, I'll ask, can sharing strengths break down barriers between seniority levels within an organization?
I have a great story for this one. Great example. Earlier on in my career, I was a manager. I was meeting with one of our finance vice presidents, very senior individual, and I mentioned how we had those little placards that we kept on our desks. And I noticed that he and I both shared a couple of our strengths. Harmony and consistency were the two. Remember, I'm in finance. I'm meeting with a finance VP. It's not analytical. It's not strategic. We've got harmony and consistency, and it became this foundation for kind of a running joke and a friendship that developed from that moment and recognizing our commonality and strengths. And I think it just shows the power of strengths as a common language. It levels the playing field and provides commonality across time zones, across languages, through virtual and hybrid and in person and everything in between. And so I definitely think there's power there in breaking down barriers and giving you that license to approach someone and have a conversation where you might not otherwise.
I don't have any story like you, Katie, but I believe that to be very true. I mean, not just the strengths, but if you and your leadership or people in your team, if you know of each other, your strengths, whether it would be Clifton strengths or even your value strengths, and if you add to that knowing people's communication styles, which is very, very important too, I think if that is all in the open, I think it breaks down barriers for sure.
And I would say whenever I've gone through, more intense conversations, whether it's with an employee on my team or just with colleagues, and we've started from a strengths-based lens, the conversations get much helpfully and meaningfully deeper, much quicker. It becomes more real more quickly because it's such a positive lens through which to view yourself and other people. And so there's just an inherent, it seems to me, quicker level of comfort that people can arrive at, regardless of any other differential that might exist between you and that person, because there's just such a human element then to the conversation you're having that just levels that playing field.
I've had a very similar experience. Like, things get much more meaningful and in depth so much faster. And I agree with Katie too, that it doesn't matter. I think strengths really does level the playing field, because it's not about your position. It's about, what you bring to the table, and it can create a way for maybe more senior leadership to notice some maybe hidden talents within the organization. And I think it also gives employees a way to advocate for themselves and to speak about what they need and what they bring to the table in a really nuanced kind of way with their leaders.
Thank you so much. So during this time, I know we talked a little bit about the pandemic, but in this sort of post-pandemic, are we there yet? Time of the Great Resignation, why is investing in a strengths-based training and any strengths-based training, not just Clifton Strengths, but any strengths-based training, why is it important for employers at this time of the world?
I don't have strengths-based assessment in the company that I'm working for right now, but I think it all falls under the umbrella of well-being, and especially now with the Great Resignation. Anything that you as a people manager can do to ensure the well-being and motivation of the people in your team, I think is granted, because there's not enough people to work out there and there's a lot of people asking. So if you don't treat your employees well, if you don't make sure their well-being is high, they'll go elsewhere. I did.
I completely agree. I think this is, it's never been more important maybe for managers to sit down with every person on their team and talk about how they can utilize their strengths at work. I mean, the research is so clear on this, and that giving people an opportunity to use their strengths at work will give them more reason to stay. And there's so much you can learn about that too, as a manager, even thinking kind of more broadly about, like, thinking about what your team does well, what is your value proposition and why people should want to work for you, and double down on that as why people should stay, right? Or what you're selling as you're trying to market your jobs and hire people in.
People managers need to understand that you have someone working with you from 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning until 5. That is the period where you have the most influence in those people's lives. So knowing their strengths and care for their well-being is really important. But we as people managers need to take a step further, which is, what is that person going to face after 5 o'clock at home? And what do they go through until they come back 8 o'clock next day? And you need to understand and know that, so you'll be able to support them, not only on their strengths, but also on the challenges that they go through.
Yeah, well said. I think one of the things that I always want to do as a people manager is make sure I'm enabling my team to show up as their best selves to work every day. And the business case is very clear, as Jen talked through some of those statistics: 3 times more likely to have an improved quality of life, 6 times more likely to be engaged at work, right? Those are all attributes that we certainly want our teams to have.
And I would say some of the qualities that were on that last slide that Jen ran through speak to me about, and even some of them throughout the research speak to me about the larger theme of belonging, having a sense of belonging at work, which matters a lot, especially now, as every organization is thinking about belonging very differently and very holistically than we ever have before. So I think there's such a possible sense of creating belonging with strengths when it's implemented well. When, as Paolo said, there's a manager really caring about it, when people are using it in ways that are productive and positive and healthy for each other. And I think it was Katie who talked about there being sort of a common language then among people to be able to create conversation that, creates a sense of belonging that, it would be really incumbent on a manager to help create that environment. But then, your team members and your employees or your colleagues, even if you're not managing those people, it creates a whole platform for them to work with, to connect with each other on, that, is a ripple effect, that you as the manager don't even need to do much on, as long as helping kind of stoke that fire and encourage that kind of commitment and engagement and connection, it can happen. So you're really creating something larger that enables that connectivity and that potential for belonging and that sense of, I am welcome here. My strengths are welcome here. I'm welcome here to be the best version of myself. That's such an important thing that can really transcend a lot of possible challenges that someone's having at work if they really feel like those things are aligned and matter at work.
I love that you mentioned belonging. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to dance, and belonging is dancing like nobody's watching. So I love that you mentioned that. Be really part of something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think strengths helps you dance like nobody's watching. These 5 things are how I dance while nobody's watching. And hopefully I can, dance more like that. Because that's just naturally who I am. And, I think again, whatever strengths assessment you would use, it gives you the chance to allow people to see that in themselves and shine for that in themselves. If it's framed well and encouraged, it can be such a boost.
It's so true, because it allows for, you don't have to be like anyone else. And in fact, you're not, right? You're not going to find anyone with the same top 5, especially in the same order. And you might have a few here and there. So you'll have great connection points, but it's that realization that you do something a little different than anyone else can. And if you really have an opportunity to use that at work and to let those shine, and your manager recognizes those things about you, it's going to be hard to turn your head to go elsewhere.
So I'd love to take a question from the audience. I see Katerina put in the chat. Have you seen your strengths change? She took the assessment in 2017 before she gained some intense management experience.
So I can take an initial stab on this. The research around this is that barring some, major life events, that at least your top 10 is fairly stable over time. The deck may shuffle a little bit. So just a personal story, I took strengths about 15 years ago, before taking it again in 2018. And they're all there still, right? It's just a different order. And so some of your strengths are certainly going to be things you can probably think back to when you were even a little kid, and just sort of how you were wired. And then other things are a function more so of our life experiences, and strengths are like a muscle, like whatever you're investing in and really working on is going to get stronger. So it's not that you're going to pull something that just really isn't strong for you and make it strong, but something you're already at least somewhat wired to do well, you invest in that could certainly rise in the rank order. So if you're curious, no harm in taking it again. I'd be interested to hear if they really change significantly as a result of intense management training. I think that's really an interesting question.
And I would say I haven't taken it twice, so I don't know. But I do think, for me, at least, my understanding of my strengths got deeper when I became a manager and went through some intense management experience. That like just took a level down, like further and further and further into why the 5 you're seeing here, really why they are what they are and how they function in the environment at work as someone who, started to lead people. I think being a people manager certainly exposes you in ways that you weren't exposed before. You have to be a little more vulnerable and open to feedback than you probably were before, or even were expecting to be, because it's a different role. So for me, I wouldn't say the actual strengths themselves changed, but my understanding of how they're actually connected, how communication and woo show up at the same time, and what happens when they operate together, and how wonderful and terrifying that can be at the same time. So it just really, I gained, I guess, a little more nuanced perspective about what they meant to me when I, in the context of intense management experience, that I think, I could say I deepened my understanding.
It's great. So a lot of Nova Network November participants are folks who are thinking about a career transition or maybe in the middle of a career transition, and they're looking out for professional development programs such as this. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask, and I think Katie, you tipped your hat to this a little earlier, how can folks in transition be thinking about strengths and paying attention to strengths when they're going through that exploratory interviewing, networking through that whole process?
Yeah, I think it's a great way to articulate who you are and everything that makes you unique, right? And I don't know the specific number, but I think having the same strengths in the same order, right? And you're never going to find somebody like that. So you are you, and I think being able to lean into that and appreciate it and own it. Just gives you another angle to approach a conversation on, to talk about, in an interview setting, right? There's often a question, what are your strengths? And here's some material to give you that head start into answering that question. And if you know your full 34, and your bottom few strengths are not weaknesses, but there may be strengths that require a little bit more of a pull to see them kind of manifest. You can talk about that as well, as far as what some of your areas of opportunity might be.
In addition to that, Katie, I would say if you are in transition, sometimes transition breeds instability, and it's sometimes hard to be motivated and stay motivated. And if you know your strengths, and you, in a particular day, you're feeling bad, let's just say I'm a relator or responsibility is one of my strengths, I am going to make sure that during that day, I'm going to use those two strengths. And that in and of itself would make me feel better and help me go through that transition period. So use them, know them and use them.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and say, on top of that, we've talked a little bit about in strengths here at Villanova, thinking about how you can set goals that are connected to your strengths. So, how might I set goals as someone who has the 5 that I have versus somebody else, right? So maybe because woo is a part of my top 5, I'm really aligned to people in a way, and relationships in a way that might be somewhat different, or influencing people in a way. So what goals might I set for myself in that transition that are aligned to how I show up and what I'm probably naturally going to do best? If I'm futuristic, maybe my goals are set with like the long range vision in mind. And then I work backward to make interim goals in the process. If I'm an achiever, Katie, you can tell me, maybe it's like you're writing a list and you're checking them all off because that feels really good to you to get those things done and feel like you got them done at a pace. So whereas for someone else, they might not need to have that checklist and cross everything off in the same way and feel that sense of accomplishment that way. They're going to feel it a different way. So as you're in transition, you can think about how you setting goals to make that transition happen for yourself, how you can use your strengths to sort of even frame your goal setting, to not feel like you have to set your goals the way somebody else does, but set them in a way that matches up for you.
I love that, Kevin. I think too, it allows you to really reflect on what's important to you at work and even in a work culture. Using one of mine, my number 3 is adaptability. I know I cannot go into a role that's the same thing every day, right? That would make me lose my mind. I need to be in a, fast-paced, something's always shifting. That keeps me alive at work. And so reflecting on your strengths and what does that mean for what's important to you at work, it's so important to find.
Great. We have a question from the audience. Have you brought in the tool formally via your work /HR, or did you use it individually with your direct team? She's trying to decide whether she should make an ask to possibly use the tool across the organization.
I would just caution there, or maybe like as an advice, if you're going to go throughout the organization, just make sure that you have the proper support, not just financial, but for change management too. You are going to need stakeholders who support the initiative, but you need middle management to be involved. And it's a lot to take depending on your organization. So by all means, yes, if you can disseminate across the organization, yes, but make sure that you have the proper support and change management.
I echo that for sure. And my experience was initially the former, introduced to strengths through kind of a mass rollout in the business I was supporting in J&J a number of years ago. We went through, all managers and above went through 2 to 3 days training. And so it was quite intense. But it really armed myself and those around me with the tools to be able to allow it to live on. And now 10, 11 years later, we don't have that formal program anymore, but there's enough folks kind of doing a bit of a grassroots effort throughout the organization to kind of keep it alive. And we built from a strong foundation. So I think that's what allows that individual approach now to be a bit more successful. But it did start with quite the effort and a pretty massive investment of time.
I would say if you can't get it across the entire organization, don't let that deter you though, because it is it's an incredibly powerful tool as a manager, and your team will notice and it will make a difference.
I would
and then it can grow from there, right? Other people will pay attention to that, and that can sometimes be the best way
I was going to equate that to pull through sales, where you have this product that you don't sell, but you show it's so good that everybody wants it. So you create it in your team and make everybody want it in your organization.
Love that. Okay, we have another question from the audience. How do you incorporate the Clifton strengths into onboarding new employees? Do you have the new staff members share their strengths with colleagues and vice versa?
I do. Just within my team, so within the 12, 15 of us, as we have new team members come on board, once they have a chance to get their feet wet, not day one, but have them do the strengths assessment. And always, it's an opt-in, right? If you'd be willing to share your results with us, we can enter it into our fancy spreadsheet that kind of maps out everybody's strengths and does some frequency on what the top strengths are and looks at the gaps and the team as well. So we do that as part of an onboarding. And I think it's a really nice way, particularly for employees coming in from outside of the company into the company brand new. It's a nice way to kind of make them feel part of the team, right away, because more often than not, someone's going to have common themes with others across the team. And so it provides that just that initial kind of basis for a conversation and a friendship.
I lead orientation for our staff here at Villanova, and at least in that program, I let them know that we have this initiative, that you have the opportunity to take strengths as a member of our staff. I encourage them, especially if they're working with our students, to get involved and just sort of make it available. So lots of folks do take me up on it, and so I offer coaching for those folks. And then we have a lot of teams throughout the university who use this as part of the regular cadence of their departmental onboarding. So similar to you, Katie, where there's almost an urgency to get their new person's Clifton Strengths results because they want to start talking about it in their next staff meeting.
Yeah, we do that here in our office in the Career Center. So whenever there's a new employee, as part of the onboarding of, oh my gosh, here's all this information for you, there's an option for them to take the assessment and then have a conversation either with a peer who's been trained and can do that debrief, or with their manager directly to have a conversation about strengths, but then the importance of continuing that conversation and giving that person the lens to have that dialogue is important. And then in performance management conversations, there are, dialogue about strengths, and certainly all around, the year, there are conversations about strengths that happen casually and in planned, ways, and, all sorts of things on and off. But I found it to be really helpful for people to have that sort of foundational step into the organization, just like you said, Katie, to really feel like, okay, there, there are other people like me here, and here are some things we can connect on.
Thanks, Kevin. I noticed a couple of our MPA students in the chat mentioning how grateful they were to their department for offering strengths to them as a part of their program. I thought it might be interesting for some of our other audience members who, many of whom are alumni who are oftentimes in a position to hire Villanova students, hire Villanova interns, to hear, maybe they could hear a little bit about how our Villanova students now have this opportunity to take Clifton strengths at the start of their time with Villanova, and maybe just briefly let us know how faculty and staff are then interacting with them throughout their 4 years here to deepen that understanding of their strengths.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that one, and Jen, feel free to chime in on it. So all of the undergraduate bachelor's degree seeking students take the strengths assessment as they're coming into orientation to Villanova. So similar to a new employee orientation, we have new student orientation, and Clifton Strengths is a part of that. And there are a host of resources that we provide to students as they're taking it. There's videos of students talking about their own strengths. There's videos of faculty and staff talking about how strengths inform how they think of themselves as a researcher, and how they think about themselves in the classroom, and how they think about themselves in advising folks, and how to change their own perspective of themselves. So the students can sort of see the broader impact of this work and reflect it in people like them who are also students. And then at orientation for all, again, new undergraduate students, there is a program where we do some debrief work on thinking about what strengths is and what it isn't, and how it works and how you can think about it, and starter exercises on how to think about having your first year at Villanova be a successful year with your strengths in mind. And then throughout the 4-year experience for students, there are many touch points, we call them, that they can possibly engage in, and some that are structured into possibly academic advising, into their athletic programs that they're part of, into coaching that they're getting from others around campus, into classroom experiences that they may be having with people. So there's tons of opportunity for them to continue thinking about this in new contexts. And as Paolo was saying about the caution around rolling this out more broadly, within an organization, we definitely have a lot of people at Villanova who have received 2 or 3 days of training at minimum, so they can help this initiative take life in different areas of the university. So we're pretty deliberate about having this touch many different areas of Villanova. So there are ways for these conversations to take place in a lot of different facets of a student's life. I should mention that our law school also has every first-year law student take the assessment, and has debriefing as part of their professional development program and leadership development program that they have. And there are other, as you mentioned, Sheila, in the MPA program and other graduate programs, there are more graduate programs that have adopted strengths as part of their curriculum or experience for students, or both, to help them learn about themselves and think about how they might apply this academically and in their career and in all other aspects of their life. So we've made it a pretty, I'm excited about that, a pretty robust offering for people. And Jen does a wonderful job helping our faculty and staff with strengths and understanding of themselves. And then, of course, that knowledge that can then be sort of fueled into the fire of the work that we're doing directly with students on strengths. So it's a continuous cycle, of engagement, of really everyone having a chance to have this kind of conversation.
The only thing I'd add there is it's been really amazing to see as we trained faculty and staff, because of their role with students in strengths and all that self-awareness and development that they experience in learning how to have those conversations with students. That's where it really ballooned quickly into thinking about, wow, this could really transform how we work in our department or with our teams and whatnot. So it's kind of 2 facets to this. It's one in their work with students and in fostering and growing those conversations, those programs, those touch points with students. But the other side of it is then Villanova as a workplace and using it there too. And it's been really neat to have this common language with our students.
It's great. Thanks for that overview. So we only have a few minutes left. I thought we might end it with naming your own personal favorite or funniest or strength that would surprise people, and just a quick, maybe, example of why. So it can be your favorite one. It can be one that turns out to be a funny one for you, which makes things lighthearted at work, or one that contributes most to your well-being and maybe something that other people might not understand.
Well, Jen, you've heard this one from me before, so I'm sorry this is a repeat, but this is my favorite for myself that kind of blew my own mind. So woo is my number 2. And I really didn't, when I first took strengths, I was like, woo seems really self-interested. It basically stands for winning others over. And I was like, that's not me. I'm more kind and more generous, and I don't want to win others over. That sounds like so I almost like rejected it kind of. And then the first time I took a small trip to the beach with my now husband, I remember we were laying out the beach towels and like getting ready to sit for just a day. And we both put in our headphones and opened up our books, and, about 15 minutes went into it. And I was like, excuse me, is this all we're doing? Because there's someone at the coffee shop who needs to be my best friend, and there's someone at the mini golf course who I need to get to know. And like, we need to do this. This is a whole thing. And I realized my whole entire like framing for going on this one-day trip was to like be with people and experience people. And I literally said, that person in the coffee shop needs to be my friend. So that was a huge smack in the face to, wow, that's woo right there. And that is the way I experience life and think about life. And I didn't even realize it until he was like, yeah, we're reading books and we're relaxing, and that's what vacation is. What are you talking about? So it really opened my eyes. That was just my funny story about understanding myself in a whole new way.
I love that, Kevin. My husband is a woo, and so sometimes it's exhausting.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I'd say what came to mind is my consistency theme, which it's funny. I think I chalk my consistency to being the middle between 2 sets of twins. I grew up as one of 5. I was the middle between 2 sets of twins. Consistency fits nicely in the middle of my 5 strengths. It feels feels like it is where it should be. And so as a kid, I was always the one, if we were playing games, I was always the one keeping score, right? It was like an older twin and a younger twin, and then Katie would like keep score. Like everything was nice and even and consistent. And I think so. I feel that consistency, strength, and theme kind of ever present in my life from a very young age.
I know we are probably over time, but I just got in trouble today because my son is in the Pacific Northwest going through an expedition, and they're having heavy rains and mudslides, and my wife didn't sleep all night, and my positivity in the morning, I'm like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And I got in trouble. So.
Okay, we've got 1 minute left, Jen. I think you can squeak out your favorite or your funniest.
Oh, I don't know that it's like particularly wow or anything, but I'll just tell you, I lead with connectedness. That's my number 1. And just while I'm listening to each of you speak, I'm thinking about all the ways I relate to that and all the connections I can make to other stories and other events. So I can't turn that off no matter how I try. So.
That is awesome. Nor do we want you to turn it off. That's amazing. Well, thank you all for all of you, our esteemed panelists. I think this was an amazing conversation. I think we all walk away with a lot of great information that will elevate our team's impact in our organizations. So thank you so much for being a part of this program and being a part of Nova Network November.